167 weeks ago, the world of video games experienced what can only be described as a powerful slap in the face to all those naive enough to put their faith in an E3 trailer, as what was nothing short of an undeniable lie strolled its charmless arse onto the market. 2 years later, when the follow-up was released, the shock from that perceived betrayal had yet to be forgotten. I wasn't willing to shell out the cash to buy it at full price, and wound up becoming the proud owner of a copy of the sequel during the Steam summer sale of 2018, after which I just proceeded to sit in my library for month after month after month, awaiting the day it finally got installed. And it got that chance last month as I was aching for a decent sequel after suffering through Just Cause 4. And if I have any regrets, it was... Wait, I not have many. If I have any regrets regarding things that have nothing to do with my future success as an individual or college or employment in general, it would be that I hadn't played WatchDogs 2 any sooner. But before I dive into what makes it so great, I believe it's of utmost importance to remember from whence it came. Put a cutscene or something, some cinematic shit.
Released out into the market off the back of one of the biggest media hype trains a major release had ever seen, WatchDogs landed flat on its ass in a year where the same publisher had released better games that followed the same formula. Its core conceit, that of privacy, the ethics behind handling personal data collection and distribution, the debatable stupidity involved in having all of a city's infrastructure handled by a single operating system, and the intricate, complex morality involved in using mass murder to compensate for the death of a 6-year-old girl, all bounded by the Pillsbury Doughboy of brooding protagonists, whose constant stream of stupid decisions led to him prolonging a quest he claimed to despise. In a world where bullets are so advanced, they phase through anything and everything that isn't organic matter. It's all fucking rubbish, the whole lot of it. And as if like a machine swinging from one extreme to the other to solve a problem, Ubisoft responded with nothing short of a brilliant polar opposite. Where the original used its hacking mechanics as an addendum to its third-person combat, the sequel facilitates multiple approaches, some of which don't even necessitate your presence. Where your creativity was bounded by the number of hackables per square meter, you now have the means to adjust the environment to suit you. Where the themes and deeper discussions pertaining to big data and manipulation were just background noise to allow for plot contrivances, we now have a story about a gang of 20-somethings who are disturbingly in touch with meme culture, whose lives revolve around growing their hacktivist brand and spreading the messages they believe in, as they gradually unveil the lies and deceits that run the tech giants of Silicon Valley and thereby the world. WatchDogs 2 embraces the inherent absurdity of a concept like CityOS and melds it with a story full of heart that, fantastical as it may be, still has something meaningful and moreover relevant to say. The tech-ridden land of San Francisco and all the eccentricities that come with it are truly fleshed out here in a manner that allows the outlandish characters to still feel like a genuine part of it. You start out small, with lower profile targets focused on publicity stunts, gaining traction over time, eventually escalating into an underground war against big data and those that use and abuse it to their own ends. From selfies to speed limits, there are a variety of means to make you feel like a part of the world. There's a degree of legitimate physicality to puzzle solving that rids it of the abstraction of having to look at a dark screen full of colorful shapes to solve problems. Wait just a second. From your drone and jumper to the degree of freedom you have over automatons that populate the environment, there's a ridiculous number of ways to do what you want to do however you choose to the extent that it doesn't feel like a stretch to say that it shares some common ground with Eidos Montreal's take on Deus Ex. There is something to be said about playing it a bit too safe with the gameplay, however. You've likely heard it from numerous people at this point. The violence in WatchDogs 2 is absurd. Why would well-intentioned hacktivists go to such extreme measures to prove even the simplest of points? It's not as though the gunplay itself is even average by any measure. To this end, a non-violent approach serves the game's mood and themes far better. Knocking people out, stunning them, distracting them, or puppeteering a vehicle into them, are actions that can be mixed and matched for the outcome you desire. And don't you even start with me on that last one, you can just pretend they're knocked out, not dead. I'm only willing to suspend my disbelief because of how much fun it is. Maneuvering vehicles and people is an art, alright? It's fun, you can't stop me. It would be a sin to not use this power. And while all this is certainly the harder option, it promotes a degree of creativity and planning that pointing and clicking simply can't ever hope to achieve. There's something so satisfying about executing a well thought out plan and making a clean getaway with none of the guards being any the wiser. And there's something even more satisfying about having said plan go pear-shaped, only to recover through a mix of luck and sheer ingenuity. Or as I like to call it, the Hitman approach. An approach that is far better served by turning up the difficulty to hard or realistic and living with the consequences of being as delicate as an actual human being. There's an air of mischief about it all, playing the role of not a vengeful sociopath out on a mission, but a well-intentioned prankster setting up traps and distractions just because that's the fun way to go about it. It falls perfectly in line with your goal as a player, to embody the force of chaotic good as the protagonist. This kind of playfulness is something the game itself encourages through its writing. The self-aware, elite hacksaw aesthetic, the references, the fun poking, it's all there in spades. And it contextualizes the way that you approach these missions in much the same way that Metal Gear Solid's inexplicable brand of American camp through a Japanese lens allows you to suspend your disbelief and immerse yourself in such an outlandish story. And like Metal Gear Solid, there is a larger picture to be looked at here, where as the campaign progresses, it begins to focus more and more on the line between utility and control. But until that point, the story of Watch Dogs 2 isn't afraid to restrict its scope to one that's more personal. It invests time building these characters up, fleshing out their archetypes, and encouraging a playful, trickster-like playstyle by directing you to take on smaller-scale institutions for obvious communal benefit. By starting small with targets that provide instant personal gratification, it plants the seeds of the notion that this technology, for all its proposed benefits, is still manipulated by people at the end of the day. It can obfuscate or bring to light details at the convenience of whoever holds the keys. This branches out into a mild lesson in how people function as a society. The need to feel like you belong to a community, the twisting of it to divide people and pit them against each other by facilitating groupthink. Also, a bunch of suits can meet a corporate agenda. It's no Nier Automata or Papers, Please, but it brings more depth to the table than one would expect of a modern open-world game. The questions it poses are akin to that of the moral of fire. Fire can be used to cook, and it can be used to destroy. How much fire is too much fire? Where do you draw that line? And in whose hands should this power reside? As we continue on our journey through an era of discovery and development, it's really not all that detached from reality. The edgy, self-aware hacker humor is just a frame for the bigger picture here, a vector that directs the story through compelling vignettes involving the individuals that comprise this group. But like most things, it's not without its flaws, and even a couple of missed opportunities. The pacing is what embellishes an otherwise perfect setup. Of course, criticizing pacing is hardly fair when the subject in question is an open-world game, where the player has the liberty of deciding when they want to advance the plot. But it's not impossible to build narrative momentum in such games, the biggest proponent of this being Ubisoft's own Far Cry 3. Watch Dogs 2 has a very clearly defined first act, where the gang is built up and you grow accustomed to the city and their mannerisms. The second and third acts, however, lack any semblance of pacing. This criticism holds regardless of how you approach the campaign. If you focused on nothing but the main plot, you'd miss out on side stories and exploratory activities that further flesh out the city by the bay, thereby also missing out on mechanical progression as well. But if you choose to indulge in those activities, the story quickly loses steam past the midway point, as it becomes more and more difficult to tell how close you are to the end. You hit the true climax of the game 4 main missions from the curtain call, and never again do you feel as accomplished or in control, even though you technically are. But if not for that, the story does well to service the characters that it features.
Yo, Horatio, man, I'm scared, bro. What is it? Don't nobody look like us. Oh, man, welcome to Silicon Valley. Hey, what do you call a black man surrounded by thousands of white people? What? Mr. President? Hey, man, they see 2 of us together, they gonna think we plotting. We are plotting.
In that sense, it's a little ludicrous when you look back and notice that the path you paved is lined with countless corpses. Early on, I made the decision to be as citizen-like as I could. I turned up the difficulty, followed common courtesy both on the road and off it, and went about my objectives as non-lethally as I could, obviously collecting vigilante tax along the way. And I found that such behavior works exceedingly well to contrast the otherwise brutish behavior expected of players in most modern games. This, of course, takes a hike when you dive into the online events, but for the purpose of my own immersion, I decided to always be the responder rather than the initiator. Always the cheeky invadee, never the gun-toting invader. Even when I did find the person barging in on my play session, I took it upon myself to have an extra bit of fun with it. But all this isn't to say that there's no place for actual violence. If there's one big missed opportunity I see, it's the implementation of multiple playable characters. The game's final mission sees Marcus sit the first third out, while his pals do some field work for the first time on screen. And looking at them silently clasp their phones on the load screen as they anticipated what they were about to do suddenly sparked something in my head. What if, and hear me out, what if you could swap between characters at the hackerspace a la Donkey Kong 64? Each of them have distinct personalities. Why not take the opportunity to explore the world through different eyes? Have each character fulfill a different style of gameplay and take on distinct mission types. Sitara could be a melee-only character and the quickest at parkouring around the environment, with maybe some unique moves only she could pull off. Horatio could have a skill set focused on remote trespassing, completing objectives without ever having to set foot inside. Wrench, the anarchist that he is, could be the one who goes loud and wields full-fledged firearms. Josh would be difficult to work in, so perhaps switch control over to him when puzzle solving or investigating. Marcus and T-Bone would be jacks of all trades, but to varying extents. T-Bone would naturally be slower to maneuver than Marcus, but with a greater hacking proficiency and a couple of simple firearms on hand, while Marcus' arsenal could be restricted to a stun gun and some small arms like a 1911 for when things get rough. And after, spoiler alert, Horatio dies, Marcus' skill tree opens up to gradually let you compensate for the spot Horatio used to fill. It isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but with some proper planning, I can really see it work. Of course, this introduces new problems like balancing character switching or the issue of having to play a character whose playstyle you don't enjoy. But at the end of the day, in spite of what I claim this game lacks, Watch Dogs 2 is a thrilling experience, which played right provides for so much more than just another open world game. It stands in stark contrast to its prequel, a game that would have been better served as a side story like Far Cry New Dawn, a game that, in spite of all that it could have brought to the table, showed up instead with a trench coat and some towers to climb. Watch Dogs 2 tells a wacky tale that leans into an infinitely more playful tone, balanced against a backdrop of modern anxieties pertaining to both technological advancement and the dysfunction caused by the irrational walls we build between us, akin to an Orwellian analogy. The need to construct facades so that when the eye in the sky checks in on you, you fulfill all the requirements of the ideal consumer. To not just blend in with the people around you, but the people who control your lives. In a world where the people in charge of providing you with the services you depend on are the ones who decide on your worth as an individual and can deprive you of those services if they so choose. If it's free, then you are the product. And my oh my, what a tragic product the people ruled by City OS truly are.